All right. Hello and welcome to this episode. My name is Matt Codde and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of Restored Minds. And in this episode, we are going to talk about stress and projection. So this is really going to build upon the last episode when we talked about what causes stress. So make sure to check that out if you haven't watched that yet, so that you kind of have that foundation for this one. And then real quick, before we dive into the show, if you could please help us out by liking, subscribing, leaving a nice comment, or leaving a review on iTunes and Spotify. All that helps us so much, helps the algorithm, helps us get this to more people. We really would appreciate your support on that mission. And as well as if you're looking for help and resources and guidance on breaking out of this loop of OCD and anxiety, please head over to restoredminds.com. Check out the links in the notes. We have some great resources for you to get started. And we have a full 12-week program to support you on that process. So with last episode, we talked about this idea of what causes stress. And one of the things that we really dove into is this idea that stress is not externally caused, meaning that it's not caused from something outside of you. Now, there are situations that are actually dangerous that activate the fight or flight where, we literally need to fight or flee danger. So in those specific situations, which are actually quite minimal in our human experience, there is such thing as an external stimulus actually activating the fight or flight response, because again, and really it comes back down to us perceiving and believing something about that experience that it may cause us bodily harm. So the stress response activates. But even then, in that situation, the external event is something you experience with your senses, with sight or sound or, whatever, hearing. And then a belief structure about that specific experience then activates the stress response. Then from there, puts you into the fight or flight and so on and so forth. So even then, the actual event itself is not the cause of stress, but the belief then is what activates. And then more importantly, how much suppressed emotion you have in your system really determines how reactive you're going to be to that stimulus. So when someone, like I used the example the other day, in the other episode, if someone is touching a doorknob and they get really anxious because they have this fear of disease, they perceive that the doorknob is the thing that causes them stress. And so stress, again, is just our response to a perceived danger and essentially in our resistance to that, right? So if someone touches a doorknob and they get stressed, they will oftentimes perceive that the doorknob is the thing that causes stress. Now, this is the phenomenon, what we would call projection, right? So you project out of you what is in you. So this is why, a lot of people will say the world is a big mirror. Right? That's in a lot of teachings, the world's just a reflection of you. And there's a lot of truth to that, even psychologically, right? In the sense of if you look outside and all you see is anger and hate and discord and all this stuff, what you're seeing is all the stuff, all the anger in here that is clouding what's actually going on outside of you. And I know this is not always the funnest, message to receive, but when you see a very scary world outside of you, what's going on is that you're projecting your own inner fear out into the world, out upon the world, so to speak, because the world is just happening, right? And we have our perception of the world, and our perception of the world is going to be dramatically altered. And the lens in which we see the world is going to be dramatically altered based on the emotions that we are storing in our body. And when we project it outside of us, then we think the world outside of us is a thing that we have to resolve and that we have to handle and that we have to change so it doesn't make us feel a certain way. And this is how most people go about their day, right? This is exactly what most people do. They say, world's X, Y, and Z way. And then they set out on a mission to, essentially control or change their environment to really make themselves feel at homeostasis, or like to feel calmer and more quote unquote safe and secure. And the issue with that, obviously, is that you're always fighting against the world. And the world then becomes very overwhelming because it just seems like this thing, can never really have any control over. So then the emotional state seems to just kind of stay and dominate, and you kind of stay in these loops. So a higher way to potentially work at this is really to work at letting go of and releasing the emotions that are actually already in our system, the pockets of energy, if you will, the fear, the anger, the guilt, the shame that we've carried around, that we buried at some point in our life because that emotion was too much for us to handle, or we perceived it to be dangerous, or we perceived it to be overwhelming. So we buried it, right? And as we did that and we got into a pattern of burying certain emotions, then, instead of handling the emotions themselves, we project them onto the world. And it's a defense mechanism, and ultimately it's a strategy of displacement, of not handling the actual emotion itself. So when it comes to fear, if you look outside of you and you see a very triggering, very scary place, what that is actually happening is that there's a ton of fear already in here. And the best way to handle it is actually to go within and handle the fear itself. And this is why when I've, worked with people that, let's say, are agoraphobic and are just kind of trapped in their house, when we first meet, right, it's the world is the terrifying place. Like going outside of the house is literally like terrifying. Going outside of the house is not actually dangerous, but their perception is that it's terrifying. Like it's a very real reaction and physical reaction they're having. But when we work through the energy of fear itself and go through the release process of that, and by experiencing the actual energy, that is how you actually release it in many ways. That act is what then allows you to start changing your perception of the world, because the dominant energy of that emotion is not clouding your perception, right? So if you think of it like these lenses, so to speak, if you see the world a certain way, it's the biggest question that we always need to ask ourselves is, am I seeing the world how it really is, or am I seeing it through a certain perception or lens? And we can always tell that based on how we feel. If we're really, really angry, we're not going to see the world clearly. If we're really, really, really afraid, we're not going to see the world clearly. And that's just the reality of being in that state. That's literally what happens when you're in the sympathetic nervous system, is that it distorts your perception of the world. And as we start to work at what we perceive to be stress, once you stop projecting it outward and thinking the world outside is the thing you need to change, and you start moving inward and you start working at it from here, right? From really a bodily standpoint, a release standpoint, that is when everything changes for you. That is when you really you're starting on the path of breaking the loop and really breaking it correctly. And this is something that most people probably will never do, if I'm transparent. And my hope is that by listening to this episode and bringing awareness to this, the first step we need to become is aware of this. And my hope is that by listening to this, or that by this episode, we can start to bring awareness to this, to start to even inquire about going down this path. Because this path is the one to true liberation, to truly being able to live how you want to live. To truly being able to do the things you want to do, to have the relationships you want to have, to do the work you want to do, to, whatever it is that you want in life, the first thing you need to do is get to a place where you feel balanced and safe internally. And that doesn't come from changing your environment all the time, because no matter what, and we know this, right? So the people that work at this from an environmental level, they just tend to repeat the same exact patterns in life. And the reason is because they always bring themselves into whatever environment they are in. And so the person who is always moving around from city to city to city to relationship to relationship to relationship, always saying that everything outside of them is the cause, they are projecting all that out on them because they don't want to look within. They don't feel safe looking within, and they don't feel safe releasing the stuff that's holding them there. And so that's really what this work is about. And so if you're interested, again, in really embarking on this journey and really doing this kind of work on yourself, head over to restoredminds.com. Again, go to the TBC, or Taking Back Control program, fill out an application, and then we can, my team and I will reach back out to you, potentially set up a consultation call, all that stuff. Because if you're ready and you're at a point where, trying to change your environment, trying to, change everything outside of you is not working, then this is what you need to do. And it's not as scary and it's not as hard as you think. It's not always obvious because we're not taught this. And again, it is a true defense mechanism. So anyways, hope this was helpful, and I'll throw some links down in the notes, or you can head over to restoredminds.com. And with that said, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Hey there. So if you enjoyed that video, we've linked up a few more videos that we think you'd find helpful as well. And if you have found this helpful, we'd really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing. And if you're looking for help and guidance, please check out restoredminds.com, as we have several options for you to get started. See you guys soon.